Welcome to Sets Wanted subscribers and non-subscribers, hopefully soon to be subscribers. So if anyone knows me or has been active in the Discord or the community posts, you know that I really don't like Renji. He's one of the few Bleach characters that I dislike. So a few months back, it was popular to talk about Renji as a character with his wins and losses and such, and I saw a lot of people coming to his defense. So I decided I'm going to make a video detailing my argument against him. Feel free to disagree and let me know in the comment section below. If you like Renji, by all means defend him in the comment section. I will be using almost strictly the manga content. Anime feats and actions would change up the video and character a lot. Also, remember, 1000 Year Blood War spoilers ahead because we are talking about the character overall. Argument number 1, the character peak. My first anti-Renji point has to do with his character and how early he peaks in his storytelling. So first, let's start with his introduction. When Renji is introduced into the series, he is attacking and attempting to kill Rukia. Now this struck me as a bad move by Kubo because I love Rukia. Most people love Rukia. She is one of everyone's favorite character. So I'm not going to like Renji attacking her, and unlike other characters who may have harmed her like Grimmjow or Byakuya, we will come to love those characters because the writing and the deeper meanings behind those characters, and even more enjoyable things that come later like fights or continued character growth, which Renji himself has none of. Unlike Grimmjow, whose attack on Rukia isn't personal, just part of his nature as a savage, I can't dislike him for it. Byakuya's reasoning for letting her be executed is explained, and it's one of Bleach's best story arcs and makes sense, unlike Renji's reasoning. Renji just attempts to kill Rukia and is a jerk about it, for what we ultimately come to find out is his own misplaced anger he has towards Rukia because he has mixed his love for her up with his guilt he had for abandoning her because of his own self-esteem, which was driven by having a vendetta against her brother, who he thinks is the cause of all this, so he wants to make this all right by killing her. Most people hand-wave this away, him attempting to kill her, as a retcon by Kubo, but it still fits in with his behavior and words later. Renji then gets sense beaten into him by Ichigo. He finally finds himself enough to obtain Bankai, after he overcomes his guilt and finishes the final part of his training, but then he just loses to Byakuya. I'll get into his losses and fights shortly, but essentially this is where Renji peaks as a character. He doesn't grow from here. The rest of his character arc is flat. Flat characters aren't inherently bad, but he doesn't grow anymore, and he has major screen time with no increased story beats. The one time he could have had another meaningful jump in character, it gets robbed from him by Ichibei. Ichibei just tells Renji the true name of his Zanpakuto, ruining any further growth or confrontation on why that block was there in the first place. It could have been his regret holding him back about his actions in Soul Society that he still hasn't chosen to forgive himself over, or even regret of Byakuya's potential death, or just anything. But no, the best we get is him thanking Ichigo for saving him and Rukia later on. That's it. Renji peaks as a character in Soul Society and continues to have good amounts of screen time with no major growth, and for me, that's a problem. Argument number 2, the combat record. I'm not counting off-screen fights because those are hard to quantify or considered negligible, even by Kubo. So Renji losing to Yami won't count against him, even though it should, and Uryu won't count as a win, even though it should. Fight number 1. Ichigo round 1. Renji in his first fight with Ichigo takes a hard L. I get he has a Gente Rain on, but he goes Shikai and still gets clapped hard by Ichigo. He was outclassed by a very weak Ichigo at this point in the story, to the point that Byakuya had to step in and save him. Now, losing to a breaking limit Ichigo isn't terrible, but it's a bad look for your first showing after he off-screens Uryu. 0 wins, 1 loss. Round 2 versus Ichigo. This fight is one of Renji's few good showings. His skill and battle prowess actually shines in this fight, and he never really looks this good again, not even really against Mask. Unfortunately, he still loses, and this honestly goes back to the other point of him doing all of this because of his own misplaced feelings. Renji just comes off as a weirdo who doesn't understand himself and is lashing out at everyone. 2 losses and 0 wins. His final fight in the Soul Society arc versus Byakuya. Now, this fight, when I think back on it, is seemingly impressive, and that's mostly because of Byakuya's arrogance about not falling to a knee, and then he does, but that is literally all Renji does in this fight, with a Bankai. Despite it being an awesome reveal and a cool looking Bankai, Renji essentially loses to Shikai Byakuya. Byakuya only used Bankai to flex on Renji. Byakuya had the fight already won before he even mentioned Bankai, and he defeated Renji's Bankai with one Kido spell and immobilized him with another, and he could have finished him with the Shikai or Kido, but just chose to flex on him and show him the difference in their power. I'm not counting the fight with Aizen after this, because one, it's Aizen, and two, it's not really a fight structurally. So at the end of Soul Society, Renji has no wins and 3 losses as a main character. Moving on to the Arrancar arc. His first fight against Ilfort Grans. So this fight is Renji's first win, but it has a fat asterisk next to it. So Renji, again under Gentei Rain, is getting his butt handed to him, and Ururu has to step in and save him. But this isn't where the asterisk comes in for the win. Ilfort goes res and defeats Ururu. Fortunately, Gentei Kaijo is approved and all of the Soul Reapers release and get their full power. This is where the asterisk comes in. Ilfort gets a retreat order and turns his back to Renji, which is what leads to him getting killed. But it gets worse when Renji then essentially confirms that if Ilfort didn't hesitate when the Gentei Kaijo was released, or just fought outright while Renji was still restricted, Renji admits he probably would have lost. So even with Bankai and the limiter off, Ilfort is Renji's peak at this point in the story. He only has 1 win and 3 losses. Moving on to his last fight in the Arrancar arc versus Aielopro. Anyone who remembers this fight remembers this is one of the most wonky fights in Bleach. Renji shows up and Aielopro shows him that he can't use his Bankai. So he tries to fight Aielopro 1v1 with the Shikai. Aielopro is the weakest combat fighter of the Espada, and he destroys Renji with no help from his Fraction. Then Uryu shows up and they do pull off the sickest combo probably in the entire series, but unfortunately they still lose, and they lose badly. So this fight was unfair against Renji, but he still should have been able to beat the 8th Espada. This was Renji's last fight in the Arrancar arc. I'm not counting the Yami fight because although we do see a tiny bit of it, it's almost entirely off screen. In the anime, they do give it some screen time. So right now we're only at 1 win and 4 losses. Moving on to the Fullbring arc, Jackie Tristan. I dare not even call this a fight. The Fullbringers were across the board shown to be of no real threat to the Soul Reapers, with the exception of Ginjo. Tsukishima wasn't a threat, but his Fullbring allowed him to make up the difference in power. So when Renji balls up Jackie, it was seemingly impressive at the time, but unfortunately just not enough to make up for all the losses. I will say the respect he shows Jackie is admirable, even if he does disrespect her as a warrior. 2 wins, 4 losses. Moving on to the 1,000-Year Blood War. His fight against Asnot and Mask. I mean, this is short and sweet, just another L for Renji. He's way out of his league against the Stern Ritter. He can't damage Asnot whatsoever, and even if his Bankai couldn't be stolen, it wasn't going to make a difference in that fight. Then he gets off-guarded one-shot by Mask, who is at this point in the war without a doubt one of the weakest Stern Ritter. So now we're down 5 losses and only 2 wins in the entire series. Renji's last on-screen fight. Renji's rematch with Mask is I think one of the worst fights in the 1,000-Year Blood War for the simple fact it feels like a fever dream. But that analysis is for another time. Renji absolutely destroys Mask. This Mask is juiced to the gills. He has defeated 2 captains in Bankai and 3 lieutenants before he ever even goes Volständig. Before he ever even starts using amped techniques. Renji just shows up and takes every single shot from Mask like it's nothing, and with his new Bankai, he just obliterates Mask and disintegrates him. This netted Renji his 3rd and last win of the series. Renji later on fights Basby with Rukia, but that fight is mostly off screen so it doesn't count, and the result of it is kind of a draw anyway. He was removed from battle off screen against Gerard, so that doesn't count either. And Renji wasn't even present against Yuha in the final battle. It was Kyoka Suigetsu, so again, nothing to count after the Mask fight. So Renji finishes the main series, not counting the Hell chapter, 3 wins and 5 losses. If you really need to count the Uryu fight back in the Substitute arc, he has 4 wins and 5 losses. But if we're counting that, we got to count the other fights as well, and the Hell chapter, which would give him even more losses. So no matter what, Renji doesn't break even. He never gets over 500. Taking a closer look at his combat record, it becomes less impressive. His 3 wins are against a human Fullbringer, whose heart wasn't fully in the fight, a Fraction who he admits if all things were even, he may not win against, and Mask, who at the time of his defeat was one of the more powerful Sternritter. That is an inconsistent mess of wins. Moving on to the final point, his overall impact in the series. Renji's overall impact in the story is surprisingly meh. Aside from his peak storytelling and Soul Society arc, he does next to nothing. He's featured a lot for a side character, and it is partially Kubo's fault for creating such a massive cast, but if Renji really was that dog that everyone presents him as, his numbers wouldn't look like this and his character wouldn't peak back in Arc 2. Looking at Renji's role in the story as a rival, which Kubo paints him as, he doesn't even get that. He wasn't ever a true rival to Ichigo, just an obstacle to overcome in order to save Rukia. Grimmjow was a rival because there was a personal two-way desire to fight and defeat each other that trumped everything else. In Renji's mind, Ichigo was a rival, but never to Ichigo or really the audience. The Thousand Year Blood War tries to paint him as a peer to the likes of Ichigo, Kenny, Byakuya, and Toshiro, yet his character nor his feats actually show this. His character point of surpassing Byakuya devolves into Ikkaku's story of just serving Byakuya till death, and it's honestly massively disappointing. Not to say that it's a one-to-one copy, but the fact that that part of the storyline is just dropped and Renji moves on from it is the disappointing part. Byakuya should have died, and Renji should have avenged him in the events of the Thousand Year Blood War. This would have completed his character arc, and his peak in storytelling wouldn't have been 400 chapters ago. But Renji doesn't impact the story aside from being Rukia, Byakuya, and Ichigo's accessory piece after the Soul Society arc. He never actually even picks Ichigo up. Almost every member of the main group has a moment where they grab Ichigo, sometimes literally, and shake some sense into him. Renji never has that. He tries several times, but it's never Renji that actually does it. For example, in the Thousand Year Blood War, when Yuha breaks Tensa Zangetsu, it is the Fullbringers restoring Zangetsu that does it. Renji just gives him a pep talk after this, already reassuring the confidence Ichigo has. I may have missed one in 600 plus chapters, so let me know if I did. Well, that's all, folks. If you have a rebuttal or just want to talk, drop your 2 cents below. But please know, what about this character arguments, or this character is the same arguments, because for all you know, I dislike that character too. And I get it. If you like Renji, you like his tenacity, or you like the dumb brute characters, I'm okay with that because I like those characters too, just not this one. Remember, like and subscribe. Have a good day. Love y'all. Happy holidays. Bye.